Thank you. So if we move along to item 5, proposal to extend the term of the Healthy Living Partnership with GLL Halo Leisure. I will ask the officer to briefly introduce the report. I will then call upon members who indicate they wish to speak by clicking the raise hand icon in turn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm Claire Marchant, Corporate Director of Social Services and Wellbeing. The report that you've got before you this afternoon, it is this afternoon now, just checking, is a pre-scrutiny report for Scrutiny Committee to consider in relation to the extension of the Healthy Living Partnership with GLL Halo. This has been a highly successful partnership here in Bridgend since 2012 from both a service and a financial perspective, and all of that detail is set out within the report. The partnership has succeeded in achieving the excellent rating for a sport and leisure partnership on not just one but 2 occasions now. It was the first partnership in the whole of the UK to achieve that, and has also succeeded in delivering that with 1.8 million less investment from us as a council than the partnership received at the time of the transfer. The current partnership term is due to end in March 2027. There is no ability within the current contractual arrangement to extend that partnership. So what we're seeking to do and to present to Cabinet in October with all the information from the pre-scrutiny is a proposal to look at acting outside of our contract procedure rules to extend that partnership. There's a lot of detail in the report about the grounds for so doing, and it's important that in this pre-scrutiny I draw your attention to the risks of challenge of entering into that extension of the partnership agreement. The rationale, and is allowed for within the contract procedure rules, largely relate to the impact on the partnership of the COVID pandemic, and also I would suggest the financial position that we find ourselves in as a council in terms of securing the most cost-effective arrangements going forward. I'll draw your attention to the fact there are a number of current medium-term financial strategy savings which are related to the extension of this partnership arrangement. So without going through any further detail, the members are asked to note the content of the report and identify any report points requiring clarification, particularly in view of consideration by Cabinet in October. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, there are 1 or 2 questions that members have got, but before we go to questions, I just want to note that this report has been exceptionally well written. I think it's a really good report. It outlines the risk to us as councillors, it outlines the benefits to us as councillors. It's really clear and it's very helpful actually. So thank you very much, Sophie, on that. It's excellent report. So moving on to questions, I have Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins first, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 quick questions. In the executive summary, it says that the council will retain certain controls on certain provision. I just wanted more detail about that, please. And then at the end of that paragraph, it says that the leisure service provision in line with the new strategic plan and approach. Have we got any details about what this new approach is, please?
Thank you very much for the questions, Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins. In terms of the council control, it's for us to determine how many leisure centres, how many life centres, for example, there are. And that's something which, you know, is often considered, particularly in terms of the financial situation we find ourselves in. So those controls can relate to operating hours. There's currently an MTFS saving which relates to the operating hours of centres. Those controls can relate to subsidies. So there's currently an MTFS saving related to the amount of subsidies for people who may be vulnerable or have a subsidy for some other reason, and that's for the council to determine and then work with GLL Halo to look at what that means in terms of the contractual arrangements. In terms of the contract, the strategy, we've engaged an external partner to support us to develop that active Bridgend strategy. They've interviewed lots and lots of people. They're in the process of pulling together their findings and analysis, and I'm sure that's something which, if Chair and Committee are minded, we could bring back to you as a Scrutiny Committee before it goes through to Cabinet as well.
Thank you. Does that satisfy the questions for you?
Yes, thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. Moving on, I have Councillor Smith next.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo your comments in relation to the report, so thank you. I did have a question about procurement, but I do actually think it's covered off quite well. So if I could draw your attention to paragraph 8.13 of the report. We mentioned financial efficiencies, and I just wondered if you could perhaps expand on that, what we're looking to try and save and where, and how we might monitor that progress.
Thank you very much for the question. And, you know, it's good to know that it's been well written, because it's quite I suppose it's a very risk-balanced decision that Cabinet will have to take, and that you're being asked to scrutinise this morning, because there are risks, and there are risks of not acting as well, and it's important we draw all of those out within the report. In terms of financial efficiencies, there have been significant number over the years, and significant number in the MTFS, which is currently approved by Council. I've already mentioned the efficiencies in terms of operating hours. That's one thing which is in the current MTFS, the amount of subsidy that we give into the partnership in order to give the access to leisure passes. You know, how universal are those? How means tested are those? Those are the sorts of things which can be subject to efficiencies. You'll note that in the MTFS connected to this proposal, if we move to the extension by 5 years, there's an additional 200,000 cost efficiency, which is highlighted because of the ability of the partner to plan from their financial perspective over the longer term, to look at efficiencies across their contracts, and by having that certainty of the contract for another 5 years. This report mentions an agency model. This is something that we're actively exploring at the moment with Halo GLL. It relates to the way that VAT is charged by HMRC on organisations, and it's something which obviously we need to make sure that we get right if we did go down that route, but we're taking advice on that at the moment, and to see whether that is a possibility. You'll note within the report it relates to the energy efficiencies that have been made across the sites over the years, and we're looking to explore further energy efficiencies, and you can see that there's a saving related to that into the MTFS. You know, I certainly have to pay strong credit to my predecessors who put the contract together, because the repair and lease arrangement that we've got, I think, has been very cost effective for us as a council. Going back, the report notes, doesn't it, that the condition of the buildings was on the corporate risk register at the time of transfer, and because of the way that repair and lease has been put together, there's been able to be significant investment come into those buildings, and that has in itself created efficiencies, and also mean that those buildings are more efficient to run.
Thank you. Does that answer? Yeah, lovely, thank you. Next I'm going to bring Councillor Williams in, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my question really is, do you think Halo have earned an extension of to their contract to 2032 in view of their excellent progress since 2012? And that's on page 45, 3.7. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gebby?
So I can say without a shadow of a doubt that I think Halo and Arwen's contract and the makeup that they did at the beginning of time is what I want to say, because it was much before my time, was innovative, it was really well thought out and well planned. One of the things that I know about from previous experience is that all our leisure services across Wales are not in the same position, nor do they have the same resources, nor are their workforce as happy as the ones that I met last week are, some of which have been in the same organisation for in excess of 20 odd years. That tells me everything about the organisation. Do I think they've earned it? I think they've more than earned it. And whilst I don't want to predetermine any decision by Cabinet, actually, the report tells us about how well they've done and how well they've sustained our leisure facilities throughout the county borough. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you. Does that content your question, Councillor Williams?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Chair. I was there in the beginning in 2012, but I take no credit for the wonderful organisation we have now. Thank you.
Yes, no. I think as well it is worth noting from the report, it's very clear that actually this partnership has worked really well, and it's continuing to work well, and it works in our favour as an authority. So I think going forward, I think it would be foolish potentially to look to dissettle. I don't know what the word is. Disrupt. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. Moving on, I have Councillor Haynes with a question, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo previous very positive words on both on the report itself, and to echo Councillor Gevy's comments as well on the success of this arrangement. It seems very positive in all of its aspects, actually. My question revolves around page 44, paragraph 3.4. And I apologise if this is already previously known, but I can see a comment: the council has procured partner organisation who over the next 12 to 18 months will support the development of the next active Bridgend strategy following the Wales Audit Office review and report published in 2020. So this exercise will include leisure infrastructure alongside other broader opportunities that support community activity, etc. And that this will help the council to identify its longer term strategy. So my question revolves around who this partner organisation is. Presumably there'll be a report published at some point, and when would that be? And when could we see it? I'm also interested in understanding at what point, given the possibility of an extension of this contract, this arrangement rather, that the council will need to determine what their longer term strategy will be.
Thank you for the question. So we're currently working with KKP, with the organisation that won the procurement process. And as the councillor pointed out, we're looking at the issues and opportunities in respect to BCBC and the partner for wellbeing interventions across the wider community, the asset, mainly looking at facility assessments of the 8 leisure centres, including the swimming pools. That went out in April time. So as Claire mentioned, they've done a number of stakeholders meetings with community organisations, national governing bodies, internal council officers and HALO themselves. And we're hoping a draft report will be received in October time.
Thank you. Does that content your questions there, Councillor Haynes?
Thank you, Chair. Most of them, yes. The final part, which was an understanding of when the longer term strategy, the timescale for when that needs to be determined. I'm still not clear when that would be.
We'll receive that report in October in draft form. I think we then need to take their report and analysis and turn it into our own strategic plan. And I think we would then be looking to bring that in to yourselves as scrutiny and then into Cabinet for consideration by the end of the financial year. I think till we see it, we're not quite sure how much additional work that we're going to have to do. But, you know, we have been meeting with them regularly and are hopeful that it will give us, you know, that clear analysis, not just in terms of this contract, but the wider strategy for wellbeing and active Bridgend as well.
Thank you. I think that answers that, doesn't it? Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Lovely. Moving on, I believe I'm coming back to yourself, Rob, for a question on 3.13, is it? Unless I have. unless my notes are all over the place. Are you happy to leave that? Right, no problem, that's fine. Lovely. Well, I think as well, if there's no further questions from councillors on this report, I don't know if there is. I think suffice to say, it's a very clear report. It does outline to us the situation as it was when the contract was put in place, where we were there, where we are now, and I think as well it's very good in the fact that it outlines what the modifications might be on the procurement contracts, that we need to look at what the pitfalls are legally, etc. With I believe it's 3.3.3, wasn't it? So we need to be mindful of that when making our recommendation. But moving forward, I think it very much seems to be a case of this is a contract that is working well, and there would be a risk to council to bring it back in source that we do need to be mindful of in terms of not just where we were with COVID, which was mentioned as a reason, cited as a reason, but our financial situation has significantly dipped and changed, and I don't expect that to change for the better in the near future. We're told constantly that it's not going to. So I think we need to be mindful of that when looking at this contract and what our recommendations are to Cabinet. Councillor Gebby, did you want to come in on that? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think it's just worth noting that this model has now been taken elsewhere by Halo themselves, and they're delivering leisure services for other local authorities very locally and wider afield in England. And I think that's important because the model was developed here in the Bridgend area, and that's important because we know that it's working, and it's always been set up to be self-sustaining. So we knew we'd have to pay some monies into Halo and Arwyn, but when these bodies were actually set up and our contracts were set up, they were done with the understanding that they were income generating, because they're all income generating services essentially. That's important. We know that other leisure services and other leisure facilities across Wales are in significant difficulties. That isn't the case here in Bridgend. Yes, we may have had to support them throughout the COVID crisis, but as we did across Wales. But I just think it shows a measure of their success with the model as a whole. Thanks very much, Chair.
I don't disagree with that, and I think as well, like you say, it's not a parochial thing. You know, it is being rolled out across, well, England as well. Hereford's in England, although I'm not going to make a land grab there as a nationalist, but yeah, no, it is working well. I think it is something that was innovative at the time, and that's something that we're becoming known for at BCBC, for our innovation on different ways of working, and I think that's a very good thing. So I think it would be foolhardy of us to look to change this, but the report's very good and it does outline that, so thank you very much. Right, are there any other questions from councillors at all on this? If not, if there's no further questions, I will thank our invitees and you may leave the meeting. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I think so. Yeah. Go.
Thank you. So our invitees have now left. So I will move us to item 6, conclusions and recommendations. Can our scrutiny officer summarise the key points, and then our committee as a whole will make its conclusions and recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I don't propose to go through a very rich list of questions and topics that we covered, you know, starting from the discussion about the re-ablement unit and through the finances, the way the model works, the regional capacity and so Maybe if I could focus on what I've taken to be the recommendations here today on this initial item. And maybe, hopefully, you can add to this list. The main one, I think, is about writing to the responsible minister for social care in terms of the issue of demand but without adequate resources, models and new requirements but without adequate resources, maybe also about the Barnett formula and how it works currently, despite the fact that it was meant to be a temporary fix all those years ago. There were some calls for information, data, particularly on the Care Action Committee, for Bridgend specific data, not just Cumtach Morgannwg data, and Councillor Gebby undertook to give us that. And also, again, from Councillor Gebby, links to previous reports. She asked me to note the annual report of the regional partnership, the market stability reports and commissioning reports, to inform members about demographics and demand and so on, and data that has been provided previously to the committee. So that seems to me something we can get hold of relatively quickly. There was also a suggestion about, this came from Councillor Gebby again, but it would be interesting to know members' views on this, about coordinating maybe responses to consultations of the Welsh Government, maybe individual members being able to respond to them, or whether the chair maybe would do it on behalf of the committee. We could explore how best to do that. That's what I've got for item 4. I don't know if it's best if members respond to that before moving on to item 5.
No, I'm quite content with that. Members, do you have any comments on this at all? I think the consultation one and how to respond on it, I think it is quite important that we do, going forward, respond to the consultations. If members are happy, I'm quite content working with officers to look to see what the consultations are, to distribute those consultations electronically to the members, and then if you want to feedback, and we can, as a committee, feedback, and I'll respond to those on your behalf if you wish, taking forward your points and what you want noting there, if that's easiest for committee.
Can I just make a point, please?
Yeah, absolutely, please do.
I don't think in some of the reports there's enough meat on the bones. We were given the bare basic facts, and I'd like to see a lot more in-depth. I mean, I know it's a very complicated issue, but I would like a lot more information on it, please, if possible.
I think you're quite right in that some of the answers that we had weren't quite fulfilling the brief. I think it would be helpful for us to have further information brought to the committee for noting. So was there anything in specific that you were thinking about with that?
It was a lot of things, to be honest. Sorry. I wanted more information on that 6 to fix. I wanted more information on... I've scribbled it over here somewhere. Basically, like I said, the priorities for action. There's a couple of sentences on each, but there's not enough information. I felt that in quite a few things I've said today, there just wasn't enough.
Yeah, and I think as well, when we were teasing the questions out of our invitees, perhaps we would have benefited. Sorry, I think we're whistling somewhere. We would have benefited from additional links, which I think Councillor Davis is perhaps a note that you're going to make now, isn't it? That we require those additional links to reports, etc.
Oh, something going on, isn't it? Yeah, thanks. No, my point wasn't about that actually, but it is a point worth making again. Is just giving us, demographics for the future, particularly in I think it applies to all aspects of council, particularly education when you're planning on school extensions and stuff like that, planning. But in terms of, adult social care, where we know, the demographics are, the numbers are rising exponentially, it's more to the point. No, point I was going to make is a point that I think it was you who raised, Freya, regarding the RAG status on the next item. And the answer given was, well, it's a regional responsibility, not a Bridgend responsibility. I got to be honest, I couldn't believe that, because if it is a regional responsibility, then those outcomes shouldn't have been offered up to the process in the first place. My understanding is that the performance report and the assessment reports are all about Bridgend performance. So I didn't want to raise that too much in the meeting, but for the future, I think we need to be clear what is our responsibility as a council and what is other bodies' responsibilities. And so I'm still not clear about where we're at in terms of those issues and the traffic light system. Thanks.
Yes, I'm going to bring Meryl in on this, but I think you're quite correct in noting that actually there is not a clear delineation, because it was quite confusing in there as to, and I get it, I agree with partnership working, I think that's fantastic, but then where is the delineation of what we need to do, what we have to do as well, because we were told we were being instructed, I believe was the phrase, to do certain things. We need to have more clarity on that. Meryl?
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say a little bit about what you've just said, but also I suppose today we've got before us an integrated report from the Health Service and Bridgend officers, and all of the information is collected on the CTM footprint. So I think what they were trying to say in the response was that the actual data, then I think it was the one green, the so many ambers and the so many reds, then they refer to the statistics reported on for CTM, the health board footprint. But for Bridgend, we are ahead of most of the things they're trying to roll out in the other areas. That we are, those reds and ambers then would not reflect what's in Bridgend, because they don't report, they only report on a health board footprint, they don't report into disaggregates, because of the difficulties they said earlier with, that the hospital beds, for instance, in the community, they may be in certain communities, but they're open to people from all areas. So there are no sort of demarcations between areas within the footprint for that service. All the beds and the community services are available to everybody in that area, in the region then, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Davis, I think, do you want to come back on that? Sorry,
thanks.
Councillor Haynes, I am coming to you.
Thanks. Yeah. So if that's the case, as I said earlier on, we need to look at what Bridgend is responsible for, and the outcomes submitted, KPIs submitted for scrutiny under that those two processes should reflect individually Bridgend as a local authority. Otherwise, what's the point in putting them in there? Thanks.
I completely agree. I think we need to have that clarity and that delineation, because we're here to do scrutiny of BCBC, not of a partnership working board. So I think we do need to write and ask for that clarity in future. Councillor Haynes?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Davis and Meryl have trampled all over my questions. So thank you for that. It was well done. I think there's always a balance to be struck, isn't there, between a level of detail and a focus on the essentials. And as a newcomer to the scrutiny process, I found it difficult at times to understand what were the absolute key items that we should focus on, because a lot of the data and a lot of the description did not relate to Bridgend specifically, and it was especially obvious, and it was only a throwaway comment towards the end of the discussion that I realised that the 6 to 6 RAG status was actually regionally based, which made a very different complexion in my eyes to the discussion. So the only comment I'd make is along with my colleagues, which is that the reports need to be more Bridgend focused so that we can be more focused and contribute better. Thank you.
Sorry, I don't disagree with that at all. And I know that we're yet to come on to item 7, which is a report for noting. And I know that we've discussed there as well about the clarity around what is coming to COSC and why we're getting certain things as a committee and things. So I am quite content if members wish to run sessions to try to help clarify, because I know we've got a lot of new members here who it is difficult to come into a committee. I know that. And I know sometimes we just need an update as well if we've been on the committee for a while, because I forget which reports we've seen and what we've discussed in the past as well. So I think it might be helpful to do a session, a catch-up session, so that we can get that clarity for us going forward. And I'm quite happy to do that and chair that if members want that. And, you know, that will be for every member of this committee as well, new and old. I think that might be worthwhile looking at doing something like that. Councillor Llewellyn Hopkin?
Yeah, another thing that I noticed, I can't remember the lady's name who was sitting on the end.
Julia.
She kept going on about how wonderful the system is. Our system's wonderful. Our system does this. Our system does that. It doesn't take away from the fact that the figures are still bad. And I was really concerned about that. I was like, as if let's tell you how wonderful we are, but we're not. And I feel really concerned about that.
So concerned about smoke and mirrors, really?
Yes. So let's deflect away from this by saying how wonderful our system is, how we report this, how it's accurate because of this. Nobody else is as accurate as we are. I don't care about anybody else. I care what's happening in Bridgend County.
Yeah.
And we're not in a good position. So, you know, like you said, smoke and mirrors.
I think I'm quite glad that members picked up on that, because it was a salient point, it was a pertinent point. And I think it's quite easy to be led down a different path, isn't it? Perhaps with smoke and mirrors, because you're right, although it's digitalised for us and we're doing well with the digitalisation, etc., where we're, and I think I said we were penalised, but we were actually being demonised, you know, that's when it starts to be an issue, because it's all well and good being digitalised and great in that regard, but if it's not going to work and it's not going to work across the board, then that presents another problem, doesn't it? So, Councillor Haynes?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I understand the concerns from Councillor Llewellyn, but I think it is important that we understand the context. Perhaps there was a little bit too much context. And it's important that we understand that there is not a basis for comparison for the figures. It would be good to have understood that in the report,
yes.
Perhaps rather than to have it verbally explained at the committee meeting. But it feeds back into my earlier comments and everyone else's comments that if the report had been more Bridgend focused, we probably would have understood much of the context without having to have it explained at such length to us. That's my only comment.
No, it's a really fair comment, is that, and I think as well it leads us to the question of the fact that we are told, and we've heard from Councillor Gebby as well, and we know that we work in an innovative way here at BCBC. It's becoming our best practice. It's what we do, certainly in social services. We're leading the way across Wales in that. But then where that presents a disparity, you know, are we working at too high a level? Are we working at too innovative a level when the rest of Wales isn't catching up, even when we've got representation at Welsh Government from Councillor Gebby to say, this is a really good way, it's really working. And it seems to be that we're knocking on a door when we're in a situation financially whereby we are tight with money here. Are we overreaching with our innovation? Because I wouldn't want to discourage that. I wouldn't want to bring that back. I wouldn't want to rein it in, because I do think it's a good thing. But is it are we hamstringing ourselves with it? It is a question I wonder. So I don't know if we need to investigate that a little bit further. But as I say, I don't feel the right thing would be to rein back on our innovation, because that obviously is a very good thing. But is it presenting further problems, and how do we address those challenges? Is it something that we need to address with Welsh Government, with our partnership working? Is that something that we need to take forward as a committee and note? Meryl, I'm just going to bring you in very briefly, yeah?
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to clarify that the position is that the greens, reds, ambers, etc. are ranked then for the whole Cwmtaf Morgannwg Health Board area. But we've heard from officers today that in the Bridgend area, we're already ahead on delivering all of those things. And some of the models for working that we are using then are being rolled out because they haven't got the similar services in Merthyr and RCT areas. And that's why those areas are sometimes red or amber, not because of Bridgend situation. So just wanted to clarify that, really. I think the difficulty you'll have with any integrated service is it is a partnership, and the model is not delivering it. The data is not being collected then on a local authority based area to compare it. However, we know that on the ground, the services being delivered are already in place on the Bridgend side, but not on the other authority side then. So just going to sum up with that, really. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't know if committee have any comments on this at all. The deathly silence of the committee.
No, not me.
No.
I would just like to say then that just brings back to the point that the reports need to be more Bridgend focused.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think we need a briefer overview of where we are in terms of partnership working, but I think it needs to be more in-depth for specific for here, because that is what we're scrutinising. We're scrutinising Bridgend, not the partnership. So, right, I think that's a recommendation we could send back. Stephen, can I come back to you for the next item, please?
Thank you, Chair. Well, item 5 then, the proposal to extend the term of the Healthy Living Partnership with GLL Halo Leisure. Again, a reasonably rich discussion about the nature of the arrangement and the possibilities for the future. It was, I think, the most interesting part of it was this whole notion of the work that's being undertaken to decide on the strategic direction that we actually go in, and how that's being conducted, what they will actually report, and how it will feed into the decision-making process on the future of the arrangement. I mean, it's clear that this was a very good report, and it's clear that the Halo model is an extremely good one. So in that sense, it's extremely uncontroversial. But at the same time, obviously, the financial constraints may cause issues in terms of what can be achieved and so on. Just to make one other point, obviously, we did learn a little bit more about the controls that we have short of the contract and the future direction. And that obviously gives us room for manoeuvre in terms of how we match resources to the future of the partnership, if that's if the council chooses to go in that direction.
Thank you. Meryl, I'm just going to bring you in.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the timing of reports then, this report has come to scrutiny for to be scrutinised before it goes to Cabinet then, and I think what we're looking for is whether the committee's view on the proposal to go back to Cabinet in a meeting that's upcoming, and then obviously there's a piece of work ongoing on the future strategy, which is going to be reported back to scrutiny before a cabinet decision is taken. Probably towards the end of this year, is what they're saying, isn't it? So I think today is the opportunity for the committee to give a view on what was in the report and what officers have answered their questions today on, whether you agree or disagree, then whether you support or don't support the interim arrangements then to extend. Thanks.
Thank you.
And sorry, and I was going to say, and if and then the reasons, I suppose, that you support or don't support. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to reiterate and say, obviously, we've had this report. It is a really full and rounded report, and I think as well it does outline the benefits to continuing, certainly in the short term, which is what we're being asked to consider here, because it will go to a long-term strategy after, I think it was 2027, wasn't it? So we're looking at that short-term extension, and it does actually, I think the phraseology is that it's almost a bookmarking, a holding, so that we can get to 2027 and then reassess. It does outline the risk on procurements to us very clearly on 3.3.3, I think it is, of our own procurement rules. And it states that we have to have certain metrics that we hit. One of them in the report is outlined as unforeseen circumstances, which it outlines as COVID potentially is something that threw this contract off kilter a little bit, off track. But equally as well, I think going forward from there, we've also had the cost of living crisis. We're in a completely different financial situation than we were, a few years back as well, and it's a worsening financial situation. And I think really as a committee, we need to consider the fact that this partnership working has worked really well. It's something that the report is clear about, that we were in quite a dire situation with the estate management as well. When Halo came on board and started partnership working with us, that's improved. There's been the money in the facilities to invest in those estates as a result of the release of other areas that we would have had to oversee had we had that responsibility overall. So that partnership working is working really well. And we need to consider how, going forward, we advise and recommend to the Cabinet, going on the report and what we've heard from officers today, our thoughts and feelings as to whether we want that to continue, both not just in the short term, but what our feelings will be potentially long term as well, because it will have an overarching effect, and I mean, it will come back to us, I've no doubt about that. So I'm going to bring Councillor Davis in, then Councillor Lewis.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it does what it says, doesn't it, really, the report, in terms of like proposing a holding situation until we can look at it on a long-term basis. I think this report reflects some of the comments we made earlier on about the previous reports, and in general, really, if we presented with a report, as the officer commented, if we presented with a report that paints a picture, it's difficult for us to get our teeth into it in any other way. I didn't raise any issues because I could see the point of this, and that is to propose a holding situation, which I think is probably a good thing. But it's difficult to know sometimes when officers don't say, apart from funding, obviously, when officers don't say, well, actually, we've got this problem, we've got that issue, they don't see us as a venue, a forum to not wash your dirty linen, but to say to us, there's issues here, we think this, we'd like to do that. What do you think of this? And again, I think it is, as you say, it's a good report. It proposes a certain situation, which I agree with. In terms of the long-term future, though, I think we need to look at it perhaps in a bit more depth. For example, a service user survey telling us what Halo service users think of the service. It all looks good. Whenever I've been into the Bridgend one or the Maesteg one or the Pyle one, it does look, and feel good. And it was great to hear Councillor Gebby's points about some great indicators when you've got staff who've been with the organisation for a long time. But I worked in local government for a long time, and I can assure the committee that, it isn't always sweetness and light. There must be issues there, but I can't see from this report what the issues are. Thanks.
I don't disagree with you actually, because there isn't that clarity, and you're correct in that this committee is non-political. I hope that comes across, that we are non-political here. We are working for the benefit of the council under the One Council ethos, and as such we have to be critical friends. So we need to know the information, and without that information we can't offer that holding up of the mirror to reflect back to Cabinet to help them as well. And that's what we are here for. That is our function, to help Cabinet with the tough decisions. And they are tough. I don't think any of us want to be in that position of, making some of the decisions that our Cabinet make. They are really difficult decisions, but we are here to help. And if we're hindered in that by not having the information, it doesn't really help the smooth running of the function going forward. So I think you're quite right there, Councillor Davis. Without being critical of officers, I think we do need a little bit more meat on the bones and a bit more information. That would certainly help us in our function going forward. And you're right as well, because it cannot all be sweetness and light. And sometimes I think we are presented with that from some reports. I wouldn't say they're biased. I would say, we do need a fuller overview so that we can formulate an opinion based on all the facts, not just some of the facts. So I think that would be helpful to us moving forward. Councillor Lewis?
Thanks, Chair. In my opinion, in the short term, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So sort of, stay with them. None of us know what's going to happen in 2 years. We could be in different circumstances, but I would say in the short term, stick with Halo and just see where it goes from there.
I think you're right there, actually, because we are being asked to look at this short term, not long term. However, I don't see in the long term that our situation is going to massively improve. I just don't see that happening. As dire as it sounds, we're looking at 2024 going into 25, so 2 years time. I don't see that our situation financially is going to massively improve to the point where at the moment we're saying and we're hearing from Cabinet members, even Councillor Gebby comes in here and says the financial situation for us is constrained at best. That's understating it. We hear from Janine Nightingale, who is the Director for Communities, saying that is pared down to the bone on there. There's no money left within it. So as an authority, I think going forward, our situation is not going to drastically improve to the point where we can start thinking about bringing in services that are working really well and effectively in an outsourced manner. So I think we need to make that quite clear to the Cabinet going forward. Meryl, can I bring you in very briefly?
Just briefly, yes, thank you, Chair. Just to summarise that, obviously the report before you today then as a committee is to scrutinise the proposal to whether to extend the current contract from 27 for a further few years. Also, we've heard that there will be work ongoing on the strategic plan, and that will inform what goes forward. And obviously, the budget process will be starting shortly, and you'll know more about the budget position as well then. So I was just going to say, we can't really predetermine the next decision, which will be on what happens after the extension. If you're minded to support an extension, that would be like predetermination. So obviously we need to wait for that information, don't we? So that's all I was going to say, Chair, and that was it. Thanks.
Yeah, and just to clarify, my comments weren't to predetermine it. It is to clarify that I really don't feel that the situation will change financially for us across the board. I don't think that's going to happen unless we find magic money trees, and I'd love that. That would be fantastic. So, but I don't think that's going to happen. Councillor Haynes?
Thank you, Chair. Again, comments by previous councillors, Councillor Davis and Councillor Lewis, agree wholeheartedly. Sometimes you get a positive report because it's a positive situation, which I suspect is strongly the case here. But nevertheless, I do share Councillor Davis's slight unease that the level of criticality in this report is probably low. Whether that's because there is actually very little criticality required or necessary, I don't know. It's not clear from the report. It is a very, if you like, one-sided positive view, but that could be because that's exactly what it is. The biggest concern for me from my previous life was the procurement risk. I think they've covered it off reasonably well, particularly 3.21, the approach to try to flush out any challenges, which I think is going to be absolutely essential. Because the last thing that we want is to find any decisions or recommendations called in by outside agencies. So, I just want to confirm that sometimes it would be good to have a little bit more criticality, even when there is a positive picture. That's my only comment. Thank you.
No, and I agree with that as well. I think based on the report that we've got in front of us, and that's all we can work on, it would be wise of us to bookmark this and to look to reassess it. And I think when it comes back for reassessment after it's been to Cabinet, I think what would be helpful is to have an invitee from Halo here, so that we can perhaps question them and get their opinion on the flip side of this, because at the moment we didn't have anyone here to ask any questions from Halo. I think that would have been helpful. But equally as well, I mean, if there's anyone else that members think we should be having as invitees, then certainly we can look at that as well, because I think that would be helpful going forward. You know, whether we have users to ask them questions about this, or, you know, anything like that, that would be something that we can do as well moving forward. Councillor Williams?
Thank you, Chair. My own experience of serving the general public as Halo does comes from 38 years in trading standards, and you soon get to know which organisations are good and which are not. The public would come to you in droves about an organisation that's failing to deliver. And as councillors, we then receive complaints, if there are any, about these organisations like Halo or other public organisations. And I would say that I've not had any complaints about Halo at all. I was down there last Thursday in the local Pencoed pool, and people were really happy with the facilities and things like that. So I can say that the critical side would come from the public. They will tell you if they're not happy with the facilities that Halo provide throughout their venues. And I think actually that the evidence is at the moment that the public are quite happy with it, and they're doing a good job. So I'm quite happy to support a continuation of that through further contracts, rather than risk putting this organisation in the hands of somebody who won't do such a good job. Thanks.
No, I think that's a very fair point, actually, because as members, we all get to hear what's going on in our patch and which third-party organisations we work with are performing well, which aren't performing well, or, you know, things like that. We do know, and you're quite right. As a general rule, Halo, I have very few comments from residents that they're doing a bad job or anything. You know, it's quite the opposite, actually. I hear good things about them. So No, I think that's a good yardstick. I think just going back to the invitees, and I've noted that we didn't have Halo here. I think it would have been helpful as well to have perhaps somebody from procurement or from legal to help us with this. I think we might well have benefited from that. But going forward, I think certainly if we are to advise Cabinet, I would feel more comfortable as the chair of this committee having somebody here from those areas that we can turn to and ask these questions as well. Because although the report is quite clear and it does outline that we have got that manoeuvrability here within this short-term context, I think if we have to advise on a long-term context going forward, I would feel more comfortable with that. And I think perhaps members might agree with that. Moving on, I don't know if there's any other recommendations that members wanted to make. No? Councillor Williams, your hand is still up. I don't know if that's a legacy one. I think it might be.
Sorry, Chair, can we just get consensus from the committee then? Are they supporting the proposal, but asking for the things that you've asked for the future meeting then? Thanks.
Yeah, my apologies. Are we all content with what we've been proposing for recommendations?
Yes.
Yeah. Any dissenting voices? No.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, so moving on, item 7, information report, 2023-24, quarter 4 performance. This is an information report regarding quarter 4 performance 2023-24, which is provided. The committee is requested to note for information the content of the report and have regard to the dashboard in Appendix 1 with the remit of within the remit of this committee when considering the committee's, gosh, this is a long tooth one, isn't it? Committee's forward work programme. Apologies. So I don't know if anybody has any comment on this at all. Just briefly. No, all content. I know we have had a little discussion about the fact that we have got new members in here, and it would be helpful to have a bit of background to help those members. So I am quite content again to hold informal meetings and do that with members. And certainly that applies to members who have been on the committee for a while as well. If anybody wants any further information, I'm quite content to hold a little meeting and, you know, do that informally. That's not a problem at all. So if we're happy to note that, lovely. I will move us to item 8, which is a forward work programme for 2024-25, and I will ask the scrutiny officer to present the report. I will then call upon members who indicate they wish to speak by clicking on the raise hand icon in turn. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from members' consideration at previous meetings, the forward work programme for this committee is attached as Appendix A. The subject overview and scrutiny committee's forward work programme will be included in the next reports to the corporate overview and scrutiny committee, with any updates from each SOC meeting included. The updated recommendations monitoring action sheet is attached as Appendix B to track responses to the committee's recommendations at previous meetings. The recommendations themselves can be found on pages 114 and 115. Thank you. I'll hand back to the Chair for any questions from members.
Thank you. Members, are you all content with this, or do you have any questions? I know in Chair's pre-scrutiny, we had a discussion about potentially putting an extra meeting in December. I don't know where we are with that because that's not showing on here. Is that something that we still need to consider?
I think it was one of the items that we have noted and to also discuss with other scrutiny chairs later this week. Because some of it is dependent on some of the issues that have been identified and which committee actually looks at them. So for that reason, it's not been put in here as a concrete meeting.
So just to briefly outline, we had a discussion, as Stephen has said, about some work that does need to come to a committee. We don't know which committee it's going to go to yet, but if it comes to this one, obviously we're quite full. So I don't know if members would once again this year be content to put an extra meeting in December, at the start of December. I don't know how members feel about that to take on that workload burden. Otherwise, what will happen is it will get put into a different meeting, and then that condenses that meeting. So we might not get through some of the other reports because we've got things like the MTMF strategy and things like that that need the whole meeting. So we're pretty stuck because the others have got quite a heavy workload on them. Councillor Davis?
Thanks, Chair. I wasn't going to talk about that, but I had no problem with a meeting in early December from my personal point of view. What I wanted to so shall I come back to the other issues, or do you want to continue with that topic?
Can I just ask the other members if they're content if we need to put an extra meeting in? Would that be an issue for anyone? No, all good. Grand. Thank you. So there seems to be consensus. That's okay. Sorry, Councillor Davis?
Yeah, just to clarify 2 points. I've mentioned before about disabled facilities grant. Just to confirm, it is with Scrutiny 3 now?
It's likely, but it's also part of the discussion for Wednesday.
Right, okay, thanks. And then the next issue regarding that then is, has the independent chair of the Governance and Audit Committee been invited to that meeting on Wednesday? Thanks.
So no. I mean, it's specifically a meeting of the scrutiny chairs. I know
basically,
the
scrutiny chairs, the 3 scrutiny chairs meet from time to time to look at the cross-cutting nature of their workloads and any other issues that are scrutiny based. And that's the meeting that we're having on Wednesday, just to catch up the 3 chairs about any overarching items that may need to be reported, and deciding on which ones they go into, basically which committee they go into. It doesn't have anything to do with the chair of audit, although I'm aware separately that there are issues with duplication between audit and scrutiny, but that's being taken up, I believe, elsewhere. Sorry.
Councillor Davis?
Yeah, just to come back on that, the reason I raised it, I sit on governance and audit. We have noticed a lot of duplication, and one of the ways to deal with that is for Gareth, the independent chair, to be invited to that meeting. I don't see it as an issue. I'm not a chair, obviously, but I don't see it as an issue. And Meryl, if it is being dealt with elsewhere, can you just tell us where it's been dealt, please?
Well, I believe it's been dealt with by officers and the chair of audit at meeting to discuss. It's probably not appropriate to talk about it in a public meeting here, but just to say that the scrutiny chairs meet regularly and have other issues to discuss as well. So this wouldn't be a meeting for the chair of audit, but we can pick that up with him separately outside the meeting anyway.
Okay, thanks.
I think you're raising quite a pertinent point there about duplication of work as well, because we do need to avoid that, Councillor Davis. But I do agree with Meryl that there is a requirement for the 3 chairs to have a meeting separate from the chair of audit. But if we need to have a meeting with chair of audit, I'm quite content to have a meeting with the chair of audit in order to stop that duplication, because it's a burden to the workload when we've got limited resources for officers as well. So I'm quite content to move that forward as well if you wish. That's noted, and I'm quite happy with that. Yeah, thank you. Right, so any other issues or questions on forward work programme? Are we all content? No dissenting voices, lovely. So I will move us to item 9, which is urgent items, and there are no urgent items of business in respect of which notice has been given in accordance with Part 4, Paragraph 4 of the Council Procedure Rules. So with that in mind, I will close the meeting, and thank you very much for attending and for your input. It's much appreciated. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, officers.